The convoy cut through the dark between worlds, a thread of silver lights moving across endless night. Inside the main cargo ship's mess hall, merchants sat around a glowing heater, sipping resin tea that smelled faintly of copper and dust. Business had been poor, tempers worse. Words mean nothing anymore, grumbled a broad-shouldered trader from Core. I lost half a shipment last cycle because a partner backed out the moment prices dipped, swore by his crest that he'd stand by it. Another merchant barked a laugh. A crest oath? Those are worth less than air these days. Everyone breaks promises when profit shifts. A third, younger one, a fresh-faced Lurian with ink still drying on his first trade charter, leaned forward eagerly. Isn't that just how it is? Promises are for ceremony. Everything moves on credits and leverage, not words. The group murmured in agreement. That's when an older voice, quiet but steady, slipped into the circle. Not all species see it that way. The speaker was Kareth, silver now streaking his once dark scales. His robes were fine, the sign of a self-made man, yet his hands still bore the faint calluses of clerical labour. He sat apart listening until the right moment, and now all eyes turned to him. There are those, Kareth continued, for whom a promise is not a bargain to keep or break, but a law, immutable like gravity. A scoff rose from the group. And who would those be? The Thrinn? They swear loyalty one day and eat each other the next. Kareth shook his head. Not them. A pause, then softly, humans. That single word drew a ripple of uneasy laughter. Ah, the Terrans again, said one merchant with a smirk. You sound like those old veterans who think humans are myths wrapped in muscle. Kareth didn't rise to the jest. His eyes, reflecting the heater's amber glow, seemed far away, staring not at his companions, but through them into memory. Laugh if you wish, he said evenly, but I once saw a promise made by a human, not for wealth, nor honour, nor even hope of return. A promise made because it was right, a vow carved from sheer will. The laughter faded. Kareth set down his cup. The sound of porcelain on metal echoed softly in the chamber. You think a promise is just words, Kareth murmured. You've never seen a human make one. He looked around at them, at the skeptics, the jesters, the traders counting profit over principle. Let me tell you how I learned that truth. On Valis Prime. In a bazaar where mercy was a luxury and a single human who made a promise the universe itself dared not break. And with that, the freighter sailed on through the dark, and Kareth began the story of the promise. You must understand what Valis Prime was in those days. A desert moon turned marketplace, the air dry with dust and debt. Every deal there smelled of rusted metal and fear. Even the wind seemed to bargain before it moved. I worked then for Vorak Dren, a merchant of reputation both feared and foul. His carapace gleamed like polished obsidian, each plate etched with gold filigree that caught the sunlight. He was immense for our kind, broad mandibles, 4 hands heavy with rings. Every word he spoke was half a performance, half a threat. I was his clerk, one of many lesser drones keeping his ledgers clean while his conscience remained filthy. That was the day she came. I remember her because no one else like her ever came twice. She walked through the command yard with sand still clinging to her pale blue skin, antennae drooping, her robes torn from the wind. A Mirian, slender and fragile-looking, though her eyes, deep and glass-clear, held a strength that defied her trembling steps. Her breathing was shallow, uneven, not the kind born of fear, but the kind carved by exhaustion beyond reason. She carried hope like a wound. I watched from the registry platform as she spoke to the officers first. Tall uniformed drones, their armour polished but their eyes tired. Her voice quivered through the translator field, metallic and broken. "My child," she said, "taken, lost." We followed the beacon, small pod, drifting in the wreck field beyond the grid. They said it was neutral space, said it was safe. It's still sending signal. Please, help. The officers looked at one another as if compassion required committee approval. "Protocol requires salvage assessment first," said the lieutenant, his mandibles tightening. "We'll log the distress and dispatch a retrieval team within 48 hours. We cannot risk resources for a single life." Another adjusted the glow plate on his wrist. "The wreck field is unstable. Old war remains. Munitions live, hulls weak. No sane pilot enters there. The child's likely gone already." Still she bowed low, hands pressed together until her joints cracked. "Signal is steady," she pleaded. I can feel my child still lives." Their reply was a wall of silence, broken only by a sigh and the clatter of a datapad closing. "Enough," the lieutenant said, as though dismissing a nuisance. "Move along. I wish I could say someone cared. No one did. Not the guards, not the clerks, not even me. Not then." I saw her stumble back from the tent, tears streaking down the grooves of her face. No one followed. Later that cycle, word spread through the bazaar, a mother begging across the market for someone, anyone, to brave the wreck field. She went to the mercenary barracks first. I passed by that way, carrying an inventory slate, and saw them laughing at her. Heavy-bodied fighters, armor painted with victory marks. She offered trinkets, rations, promises of servitude, even a pendant made from her broodstone, a thing no Mirian mother gives away lightly. They tossed her pendant back in her face. "Not enough for hazard salvage," one said. 1,000 crowns up front. Maybe then we'll consider. "Double if you want the brat alive," another added to roaring laughter. Her voice trembled. "I have no more. Then you have no deal." They turned away. She didn't stop. She went to the market square next, to merchants and haulers. Most waved her off like a buzzing fly. Valis Prime had no patience for the poor, not unless their misery could be bought cheap. And then she came to him, to Vorak Dren. I was beside him then, sorting cargo invoices, when she approached. He sat reclined among crates of precious wares, draped in silver chains that chimed softly whenever he moved. His mandibles curled in what passed for a smile, all honey on the surface, venom underneath. "A Mirian woman," he said, voice low and smooth, seeking help in a place built to sell it. He gestured for her to speak. And she did, trembling, desperate, her antennae twitching low in submission. Even now I can recall the smell of dry spice and old metal hanging in the air, the way her voice faltered between hope and despair, and the way Vorak leaned forward, eyes bright, curious, like a predator humouring its prey. That was when everything began, the moment mercy was priced and a promise was waiting to be born. Her voice was weak, the translator whirring unevenly. "Please, save my child. You have ships. I will pay. I will serve. Vorak smiled the way a blade smiles before it cuts. "Serve? Ah, my dear, I have no need of servants. You cannot pay me in coin, and yet." His tone shifted, almost kindly, the kind of kindness that makes you feel colder. He leaned closer, his mandibles clicking softly, suggestively. "There are other ways a desperate woman may offer value." She froze. I could see her realize what he meant, see the horror flare across her face. Her antennae stiffened, trembling, as if trying to recoil from the words. Her hands quivered at her chest. "If it would save him," she said, barely more than a breath. Vorak's smile widened, vile and triumphant. He leaned forward, his bulk shifting like a boulder come alive, and set a jeweled hand upon her shoulder. I still remember the way she flinched, just slightly, almost imperceptibly, but enough for me to see the revulsion ripple through her. Her pale skin seemed to tighten beneath his touch, as if her very body wanted to escape it. "Then I guarantee his rescue," Vorak murmured, his voice steeped in vile delight. It wasn't a promise. It was ownership disguised as mercy, and she knew it. Every Mirian gesture of pride, every ounce of spirit crushed in that instant beneath the weight of his hand. I wanted to speak then, to say something, anything. But I was young, a clerk with ledgers for courage. So I stood there, silent, pretending not to see. She lowered her gaze, tears streaking the dust on her face. I thought she would accept, because that's what people did when hope was all they had left. But then a hand slammed across the stall, fingers like iron clamped around Vorak's throat, lifting him clear off his feet. He kicked, choking, as his wares toppled. The bazaar went deathly still, every eye fixed on the figure that had appeared as if from nowhere. A human. We hadn't seen one of their kind on Valis Prime in cycles. The way he held Vorak, calm, exact, and unyielding, spoke of a soldier's training, the kind etched into the bones by years where hesitation meant death. Every motion was exact, unyielding, a quiet proof that he had faced far worse and survived. Then his voice, low and steady, cut through the gasps of the bazaar. "Get your hands off her," the human growled, "or I'll crush your windpipe." All eyes widened in disbelief. A lone human in dust-worn fatigues stood over the struggling merchant, his grip unshakable, his glare colder than space itself. The alien mother froze, disbelief stealing her breath. The man looked at her once, briefly, then turned back to the choking merchant. "You're done here." He threw him down like trash, and with that, a human stepped between her and a universe that had turned its back. I will admit it, a small, guilty part of me felt a flicker of satisfaction seeing Vorak treated like that. That vile, overbearing merchant, humbled for once. But the shock of the moment was like a slap. I was as stunned as everyone else. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The marketplace stood frozen, every sound swallowed by disbelief. Vorak Dren, my master, lay sprawled amid the wreckage of his wares, the jewelled plates of his carapace dulled by grime. His mandibles twitched, gasping for breath that pride would not let him lose. Then, slowly, he rose. I had never seen him look so small. Fury, yes, always fury, but this was something colder, heavier. His lower arms trembled as he straightened the silver chains across his chest. The gold filigree on his plates no longer gleamed, it burned. He turned his glare upon the human. The crowd parted instinctively, as if distance alone might shield them from what would follow. "You dare." Vorak rasped through the translator, his throat still raw from the crushing hand. "You dare lay hands on Vorak Dren? On Valis Prime of all places?" The human said nothing. Vorak's mandibles flexed, rage spilling like venom. "Do you have any idea who I am, mammal? I own this sector's trade routes, its guards, its airlocks. I can have you erased before the sun's set." Still, the human didn't flinch. His gaze remained steady, not defiant, not boastful, simply unmoved, like a soldier long past caring who issued threats. The silence pressed tighter. I felt it in my plates. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Vorak stepped closer, his shadow falling over the Myrian woman. "You and this pitiful creature will regret this moment," he hissed. "I will see your names carved in debt and ruin. The next cycle, your corpses will hang outside my gates as—" The human's eyes lifted, just lifted, and every word died in Vorak's throat. I saw it, that look, and something in me went cold. There was no rage there, no heat, only the terrifying calm of one who has walked through war and never truly left it. The kind of look that makes even a monster remember fear. Vorak's mandibles twitched twice. Whatever he saw in that human gaze made the colour drain from his eyes. He stepped back, spat a curse in our tongue, and snarled, "This is not over. You've doomed yourself. And her." He turned and stormed off, his attendants scrambling after him, jewels clattering against stone. For a long while, nothing. Then whispers slithered through the crowd. "Did you see he lifted Vorak like a child? He's signed their deaths. No one crosses Vorak Dren and lives. The human has doomed them both, the woman, the child, and himself." Vorak, the name passed from mouth to mouth, fear clinging to it. He was no common trader. He owned half the salvage rights in the sector, his debts collected by knife and by law alike. Entire crews owed him, entire markets bent beneath his weight. Everyone knew this, everyone feared this, everyone except the human. The Myrian mother could feel it too, the ripple running through the crowd, awe, fear, curiosity, all tangled. The human's act had shattered the unspoken rules of this place. No one defied power openly. No one lifted a hand against it, not here, not ever. The mother sank to her knees, trembling. Her voice was barely a whisper. He was my last hope. The human crouched beside her. I remember how the light caught the dust on his uniform, old, faded, yet still bearing the ghosts of insignia. His hands were scarred, calloused, steady. He spoke then, and the marketplace stilled again. "Name's Jacob Miller," he said. "Ex-SFC Terran Defense Corps, and ma'am." He looked toward the horizon where the wreck field shimmered like a graveyard of forgotten wars, hope still alive. The translator rendered his words in broken syntax, yet somehow every being understood. She stared at him, her voice shaking. "You would help me? I have little too." He gave a faint, tired smile. "I don't care for riches," he said quietly. "I've seen worlds burn and men break, but I've never walked away from someone still fighting to save what they love." He stood, dusting off his hands. "Your child comes home. No wreckage, no hazard, no merchant's threat will stop me. I promise it for as long as there's breath in my chest." I felt something strange in my chest. Not courage, not pity, something heavier. Because I knew what Vorak's revenge would mean, and yet, part of me wanted to believe the human could defy it. Around us, the aliens murmured in disbelief. A Dravik hauler whispered to another, "Did you hear what he said? He's going into the wreck field for one child." The other shook his head. No one goes there alone and comes back. He's already dead. Jacob adjusted the straps of his pack, the battered metal of his sidearm glinting as he turned toward the gates. Yeah, he muttered almost to himself. They've said that before. And as he walked away, I could see it in the crowd. Disbelief, fear, fascination. Even the boldest traders and mercenaries dared not breathe, as if that human alone carried the law of the universe in his hands. I remember poring over the ship's logs of Miller's rescue, reading, watching every course correction, every subtle adjustment recorded in meticulous detail. Each entry was a pulse, a testament to a man who had waded into a graveyard of steel and fire for a child he had never met. Beyond the colony's perimeter, the void stretched cold and indifferent, a silent ocean of endless darkness. Miller's shuttle, battered, barely more than a cargo runner, groaned as it threaded through the drifting wreckage. Its plating was scarred, paint peeling, rusted from years of neglect. It was never meant for this, a battlefield of floating death, but it was all he had, and all that stood between a life and the merciless void. Ahead lay the wreck field, a necropolis in orbit. Once proud warships floated like skeletons, their hulls split open, steel entrails twisting into the void. Some ships still hissed plasma, vents glowing faintly like dying embers. Others leaked frozen atmosphere that sparkled like fractured starlight. Panels collided lazily, drifting as if even metal feared the silence. The sensors screamed, unstable debris, radiation pockets, and microgravity anomalies. Miller ignored them. He had one focus, the faint green pulse of the pod. Still alive. The wreckage pressed in around him. Giant plates floated past like cliffs, twisted decks littered with the hollowed shells of helmets and bodies, eyeless and staring into eternity. A loose engine block tumbled by, catching a shard of reflected starlight. Each shadow was a predator. He adjusted thrusters with careful taps, every motion deliberate. The console warned of collisions, yet he refused to be slowed. The pod's beacon pulsed faintly, fragile but persistent, like a heartbeat calling across the void. "Hang on, kid. I'm coming," he muttered, fingers tight on the controls. Then the avalanche began, a slow chain reaction as a stray missile casing brushed a panel, sending debris tumbling. Metal groaned and scraped, hollow thuds echoing through the shuttle. Miller twisted and banked, weaving between massive hull sections, sparks showering as twisted steel kissed the hull. One wrong move could crush them both. His pulse hammered, sweat forming along his collar, but the promise to the mother burned heavier than fear, a vow born of her desperate eyes and trembling hands, carrying the weight of a life entrusted to him, unyielding, absolute, demanding he see it through no matter the cost. At last he glimpsed the pod, cradled in the shadow of a shattered dreadnought. Its hull was scarred, blackened from fire, yet its beacon winked steadily. A fragile bubble of life in the vast void. Miller exhaled. Relief was a distant luxury. The work was far from over. He killed thrusters, grabbed his helmet, and sealed it tight. The airlock hissed as it opened. He anchored himself with mag clamps. Every step was measured. Shards of glass and twisted metal floated past, slow-moving but lethal. Each second weighed. Inside the pod, the child cowered, wrapped in a ragged blanket inside the pod's tiny life bubble. Miller's gloved fingers pressed to the viewport, tiny palms pressed weakly against the glass, smudging it. Alive. Still alive. He drew a cutting tool, the arc flaring with blue light, sparks scattering into the black. The dreadnought groaned around him, massive plates shifting like the slow breathing of a giant predator. Structural warnings screamed on his console, but Miller ignored them. Every cut, every tap against the warped seal was deliberate, precise, no motion wasted, no hesitation. Each second was stolen from death. The child's lips moved soundlessly. Miller imagined the words, felt the weight of trust pressing through the tiny glass wall. "Don't leave me." The seal cracked at last. Air hissed violently, fogging the viewport. Miller braced, slipping the pod open just enough to slide the child into his own suit-lined harness. Tiny fingers gripped his glove. He closed his hand around them, steady, unyielding. "All right, kid. You're safe now," he whispered. Behind him, the wreck trembled. A deck of the dreadnought sheared loose, drifting toward the pod. Miller kicked off, thrusting them clear, the small shuttle looming in the distance, a fragile haven. Debris surged in a storm, shards whistling past. One slice of steel grazed his shoulder, jolting him, yet he kept the child tight against him, every motion exact, every breath controlled. Ahead, the shuttle's docking hatch opened like a beacon. Miller surged forward, muscles taut, lungs burning, eyes fixed on salvation. A final burst, and they were inside. Hatch sealed. Air hissed into the chamber. For the first time since leaving the colony, he allowed himself to breathe fully. The child's eyes fluttered open, staring up with fragile wonder, alien, yet no different in the raw language of fear and relief. Miller pressed a hand to the small shoulder, voice firm, unshakable. "I promised your mother I'd bring you back." Outside, the void remained indifferent, vast and silent, but within that small shuttle, a promise had been kept, and a life saved. But the logs were not finished there. There was more. Miller's shuttle had just cleared the wreck field, limping, its hull scorched and trailing vapor, when the proximity alarms screamed red across the console. For a heartbeat, I imagined the man relaxing, believing his task done, the child safe at last. But the void has a cruel sense of timing. The sensors flared, 6 signatures converging fast. Sleek, crescent-winged vessels, their hulls gleaming with the mark I knew too well, Vorak's crest, etched in gold and venom. I remember watching the feed from the outer relays as the ships fanned out in formation, circling like carrion beasts scenting blood. Vorak had made good on his threat. The same voice that once bragged in the merchant halls now reached through the static of the comms, cold and mocking. "Jacob Miller. Vorak Dren sends his regards." Miller's reply came after a pause, quiet but steady, the kind of calm that belongs only to those who'd stared down worse than death. "Yeah? Tell him he should have sent more." For a moment, even the warships seemed to pause, their engines humming uncertainly as the pilots hesitated, eyes flicking across consoles, unsure if the human before them was bluffing or if facing him meant certain doom. The outer relays crackled again. "Do you not understand? You're just a cargo ship. You'll be wrecked before you blink." Miller's reply was calm, unwavering. "Then come and try." And then the stars ignited. Plasma fire tore across the void, brilliant arcs carving through the black. Miller's battered shuttle rolled violently, thrusters shrieking in protest. The first volley grazed his hull, stripping what little shielding remained. The second would have split him apart, but he was already moving, threading between the drifting bones of dead warships like a shadow reborn. On the colony's relay feed, I could barely follow his maneuvers. He dove beneath a shattered carrier, using its torn bulk as a barrier, letting plasma bolts splash harmlessly across its ribs. Metal screamed as fragments scraped his hull, but the human flew on. Steady hands, cold precision, every motion deliberate. "Hold tight, kid," I heard him say through the static. "We're not done yet." The fighters pressed closer, wings glowing with weapon charge. Vorak's men laughed over the open channel, confident, cruel. To them he was prey, a crippled relic of a ship and one fragile life aboard it. But I had seen prey before. Miller was not prey. He rerouted auxiliary power to the engines, a suicidal move. The hull groaned, superheated lines glowing faint orange. Then in a single violent burst, the shuttle spun and surged. The alien fighters overshot, confused for seconds too long. Miller struck. A cannon blast, old tech, jury-rigged, slammed into the lead fighter, tearing its wing apart. It spiraled, colliding with another, both vanishing in a silent bloom of light. Vorak's hunters began to panic. One of the pilots shouted over the comms, voice trembling with disbelief. "He's just one cargo shuttle! Damn it! Kill him before he kills us all!" One tried to flank. Miller cut power mid-flight, drifting dead, letting the fighter rush past, then reignited the engines in a flash, firing point blank. The alien ship shattered. His shuttle was bleeding air, alarms screaming, yet he kept fighting, weaving through wreckage, firing, burning, enduring. Every time he should have died, he clawed his way back into the fight. When the last 2 fighters closed in from opposite angles, Miller forced his shuttle into a dive toward the largest debris mass, the split husk of a dreadnought. The alien ships followed, chasing into the dark. Too close. A flare of thrusters, a flash of light. The dreadnought's reactor core, long dormant, bloomed once more, awakened by his deliberate shot. The explosion swallowed the 2 pursuers in a flood of white flame. When the light faded, the human shuttle drifted alone. Battered, smoke trailing, alive. For a long moment I just stared at the data feed, 2 life signs, the man and the child, against 6 of Vorak's best. Then through the static came a final transmission, calm, ragged, resolute. Like I said, he should have sent more, and the feed went dark. Even now, when I close my eyes, I can see it, one broken human vessel limping through the graveyard of ships, defiant against the void itself. Vorak called it vengeance, but what I saw that day was a reckoning. The news had not reached the bazaar yet. Vorak was laughing when I arrived. The kind of laugh that didn't need humour, only cruelty. It rolled across the bazaar like thunder through dry canyons, deep and self-satisfied. The scent of hot metal and spice hung thick in the air, but all anyone could taste was the bitterness of what was unfolding. His enforcers had dragged the Mirian woman into the square, to the very same place where the human had once stood against him. Her feet scraped the stone, robes torn, dust streaking her face. She didn't fight. She couldn't. The guards shoved her to her knees before Vorak, and the crowd watched in horrified silence, too afraid to move, too wise to interfere. He stood tall at the centre of it all, polished carapace gleaming, mandibles spread in mock delight. The sunlight caught the gold filigree on his armour plates, throwing sharp glints across the market stalls like shards of contempt. "You should have accepted my offer, Mirian, when you had the chance," Vorak sneered, his voice smooth and sharp as cut glass. "You begged at my feet, and I was merciful. I offered you survival. You repaid me with insult. You staked your fate on a human's shallow promise, the kind of delusion only primitives still believe in." He slammed one clawed hand down on a crate beside him, the impact sending a sharp crack through the square. "Do you think anyone defies Vorak Dren and walks free? That a frail thing like you could humiliate me in my own market?" The Mirian flinched at his words, but did not answer. Her eyes shimmered, wet but fierce, the kind that refused to give him the satisfaction of a scream. Vorak paced before her, puffed and grand, every motion dripping with disdain. "Your human saviour will learn soon enough what it means to insult me. I've already sent 6 of my fighter crafts, 6, to deal with his arrogance. Skilled pilots, each one worth more than your entire broodline." He leaned forward, voice lowering to a hiss that still carried through the still air. "By now they'll have killed him. Vorak Dren's regards will reach him before his next breath." The mother's breath caught. Her voice came out hollow, like a prayer half forgotten. "You sent 6 crafts to kill him?" "To remind the galaxy who I am," Vorak said proudly, "that even the void answers to my will." She shook her head slowly, disbelief and grief twisting together. "You sent 6 ships to punish kindness," she whispered, "but not one to save my child." The words struck like a thrown blade. The crowd stirred, whispers rippling outward. Some murmured agreement under their breath, others turned away, unwilling to be seen pitying her. "That's Vorak Dren," someone said near me, low and bitter. "Cross him, and he'll burn the stars to prove a point." "The human doomed her," another hissed. "No one survives defying a merchant lord." But not all voices were cruel. One of the older haulers muttered, "Still, 6 ships against 1? There's no honour in that." Vorak's mandibles flared wide, catching the comment like blood in the water. "Honour?" he bellowed. "Honour is for the weak. Power is its own virtue. That human," he spat the word as if it were filth, "is nothing. His little act of defiance ends today." He turned back to the Mirian, towering above her, his carapace reflecting the sunlight like black glass. "You should pray the wreckage of his ship burns fast, for that will be mercy compared to what I'd have done had he lived." The mother said nothing. She simply sank to her knees, clutching the pendant at her throat, its cracked surface dull in the light. Tears fell quietly, darkening the dust beneath her. For a moment, even Vorak's laughter faded. Only the wind moved, dry and restless, whispering through the square like something ashamed to stay. And there, in the silence that followed his boasting, I saw it. Not victory, not power, but rot. The kind that grows inside a soul too long drunk on its own reflection. I said nothing. I only watched, the ink on my ledger drying beneath my claws, as a mother wept and a tyrant laughed, and the bazaar pretended not to hear. But then the sky broke. A low rumble rolled through the air, distant at first, then swelling until every head in the market turned upward. The twin suns flared off a trail of black smoke, cutting through the clouds. Something was falling. No, fighting to land. The air shimmered with heat and the acrid sting of burning fuel. And then it came, a single shuttle, battered, scorched and screaming against gravity, slamming down into the port in a shower of sparks and dust. It wasn't one of Vorak's craft. It was his, the humans'. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The crowd just stared, eyes wide, mandibles slack, tendrils frozen mid-quiver. The notion that this frail metal husk, this relic, had survived the graveyard field, much less 6 pursuit crafts, was unthinkable. Yet there it was, smoking but whole, breathing. The hatch hissed open. Steam poured out, curling around a tall silhouette, armour dented, face streaked with soot, eyes still burning with the same steady fire that had silenced Vorak days before. In his arms, wrapped in a survival cloth, was the Mirian child. The mother's cry tore through the stillness like a sunrise breaking the dark. She stumbled forward, disbelief and hope wrestling in every trembling step. The mother clutched the little one close, sobs racking her body. Her eyes lifted to the human, full of tears that words could never match. Gratitude, awe, disbelief, all of it trembled in silence on her face. "You came back," she whispered. You kept your promise." "I told you," the human said softly, voice raw but steady. "Only death could have kept me from my promise." The child, weak but breathing, looked up at him, wide-eyed, as if trying to understand the being who had crossed fire and death for him. The mother clutched the little one close, tears streaking down her face, her antennae trembling with gratitude. The crowd stood frozen, a sea of faces caught between wonder and terror. Those who had mocked the human now fell silent, mandibles twitching, their pride shrivelling like leaves before flame. The traders who had whispered, "He's doomed them both," now looked at one another in shame, unable to meet the mother's tearful gaze. The workers who had muttered, "No one crosses Vorak and lives," pressed their hands together in quiet disbelief, as if witnessing something sacred. A Mirian elder bowed his head, trembling. "By the stars," he murmured. The human treated his promise like it was life itself, something to be guarded, fought for, and if needed, died for. Some whispered prayers, others simply stared. A few even stepped back in fear, not of him, but of what he represented. For if one human could defy death, defy Vorak, then perhaps the balance of power itself had shifted. No one dared to speak his name aloud, but every being in that bazaar felt it. The weight of a promise kept against the impossible. One moment, Vorak's chest swelled with swagger. The next, his throat had gone dry. I could see the colour drain from the filigree on his plates, an effect I had never witnessed before. The merchant who had ordered hunts and extinctions felt suddenly very small. Miller's eyes moved from the child in the mother's arms up to the man who had sent hunters after them. There was no hurry in the motion, no flare of triumph, only the slow, inevitable focus of a predator that has decided what it will take. "You," Miller said, voice low and cold. The translator spat out the syllables into 100 tongues, but the meaning was simple, direct. "You sent 6 ships to finish what you started." The market felt the change like a gust. The spice stalls waft stilled, the chatter fell to a pin-drop hush, and even the air seemed to lean in. Vorak rose, clattering to his feet. His enforcers fanned out automatically, claws clicking on stone. "You insolent," he began, but the words had no venom in them, only thin surprise. Miller walked forward. Each step was unremarkable, measured, reinforced by a presence that needed no trumpet. The human's uniform bore the scars of a dozen fights. His face held soot and fatigue, but his posture was straight as a spar's mast. He stopped only a few paces from Vorak, close enough that the merchant's enforcer tensed. "Back off!" One of the largest enforcers, a Cronan, barked, moving in front of his master. His motion was sharp but not confident. He had seen many things in the bazaar, bribes, bargains, threats, but never this kind of stillness. His hand hovered near his weapon. Miller's voice was quiet and very near. "Step aside, this is between me and Vorak," Miller said quietly. "I'm not going to kill him, not yet." It wasn't a threat so much as a fact laid down like a rail across which choices must run. The enforcer lunged, perhaps out of duty, perhaps because fear needs motion. He was almost twice Miller's size, a wall of muscle and armour bearing down with a snarl, weapon half raised. For a heartbeat I saw the clarity of his intent, a swing, a shove, a show of dominance. It all unravelled in the span of a breath. Miller moved as if the answer had been rehearsed 1,000 times, a single pivot, a lever of shoulder. The giant's own weight turned against him. The enforcer folded like a marionette with its strings cut and crashed to the ground, face first with a hollow, final thud. He didn't get up. The rest of the enforcers did not come. One staggered a step, then pivoted, then fled, the click of his armor growing smaller with every hurried stride. Another hesitated at the edge of the crowd, mandibles tight, then lowered his head and melted into the crowd like a shadow. Silence clung to the square for a moment longer than it should have. A few hearts pounded so loud I felt the echoes on my own plates. Vorak stood where he was, chest rising and falling too fast for a creature who prided himself on control. He opened his mandibles as if to rage, to order, to demand retribution, and yet the words would not form. Miller met him without malice, without spectacle. He was simply there, and the weight of that presence made the merchant look small. "You threw your fleet at a promise," Miller said. His voice carried across the stone, steady and raw. "You thought you could teach a godless market how to respect you. You bought pilots, not courage. You bought threats, not promises." Vorak's glittering eyes narrowed. "You presume to teach me." "I don't presume," Miller cut in. "I know what I promised a mother. You think you taught a lesson today? You tried to end a life. You tried to take a child from her. You gambled with a life like she was coin." He took a breath, and the whole bazaar listened. I walked into the wreck field. I courted death for a child I did not know. I pulled him out of the dark and I brought him back. I do not kill for pleasure. I do not slaughter out of spite. But I do keep my word. A tremor passed through the crowd, a ripple that began as doubt and ended in the shape of something like fear. Some faces hardened with relief on the mother's behalf. Others, the merchants who'd scoffed, understood the scale of what had happened and felt the hollow where their certainty had been. Miller stepped closer still, close enough that I could see the steadiness in his eyes like a forged edge. "And let me give you my word again," he said. "Harm this woman or her child, and whatever mercy you think you hold will be ash. I will not hunt you for sport. I will end what you've built, and I will do it without malice, without joy, only methodically, accurately, until nothing you cherish or command remains. That is my promise." He did not raise a weapon. He did not shout. He did not preen. It was a vow that carried weight because he had already borne its cost. The market could measure the truth of it in the smoke-streaked shuttle behind him, in the child's warm breath in its blanket, in the number of ships that had not returned. Vorak's arrogance cracked. I watched his mandibles work, tasting words that would not comfort him. Pride warred with a sudden, deep calculation. He had struck wolves before. He had believed himself untouchable. Now every ledger entry, every coin, every purchased favour seemed paper-thin next to what human breath could mean. "You will live," Miller finished almost gently. "Not because I'm merciful, because lessons are more useful when they're remembered." Vorak made no move to attack. His attendants had fled, his chorus of bluster emptied. He swallowed the urge to command some final indignity, to lash out and reclaim the theatre, because the room had gone quiet for reasons he did not control. The merchant's throat seemed to work on a sound that never came. Miller turned away then, not loudly, not triumphantly. He did not wait for applause. He did not wait for punishment. He slung the child gently back to the mother, a careful human motion that conveyed what trophies never could, and allowed her to hold her broodstone and her child like the two most precious things in the universe. As he walked toward the cooling hull of his shuttle, he looked back once. "This is your warning," he said to the crowd, as much as to the man they had called their tyrant. "Hurt them, or even cast a shadow of ill intent their way, and the same reasoning that brought me here will bring an end to what you are." He tucked his chin, the burden of the promise plainly visible. "And you will know, too late, that I don't break my promises." I remember standing there, ledgers still in my claws, and realizing that everything I thought I knew about strength had just been rewritten by a creature of flesh and dust named Jacob Miller. The bazaar exhaled, a long, involuntary sound that blended into 1,000 languages. Some cheered, some gaped, some bowed their heads. Vorak remained, a figure carved in pride and suddenly lonely. Even he could not, in that moment, dismiss the fact that everyone had witnessed something that did not belong to his ledger, a human covenant honoured in the black between stars. Not with worship, not with allegiance, but with an honest, unwelcome recognition. The market had seen a power that coins and contracts could not buy. When Careth finished, the heater's glow had burned low, casting the mess hall in red embers and long shadows. No one spoke. Even the hum of the engines seemed distant, as if the ship itself were holding its breath. The youngest merchant, the Lurian who had mocked promises at the start, stared into his untouched tea. His crest had lowered, a silent admission that his earlier laughter now felt obscene. Across from him, the Corran trader shifted uneasily, mandibles twitching as though searching for words that no longer seemed adequate. Finally, one of them, a weathered hauler with a voice like rusted metal, broke the silence. "You saw all that? With your own eyes?" Careth nodded once. Every word. Another merchant leaned forward, disbelief edging into fear. "And Vorak, he lived?" Careth's eyes glimmered in the half-light. He lived, but he never ruled again. His ledgers dried, his guards left him, and even his name became something traders whispered only as warning. No one dared cross the Myrian mother. No one dared speak against the human's promise. Silence again. Outside the viewport, the stars drifted past, cold, ancient witnesses. The young Lurian swallowed. "So the human? He never came back?" Careth shook his head slowly. "No, some say he left with the dawn. Others that he was called to another promise somewhere out in the dark. But I remember the look in his eyes when he left that bazaar. It wasn't pride. It wasn't anger. It was peace. The kind you only see in those who've already made peace with what they are." "And what are they?" someone whispered. Careth set his cup down, the faint clink echoing softly. "When humans make a promise," he said, "they don't weigh it against profit or survival. They bind themselves to it, as if the universe must bend to their will until it's done." He looked around the circle of traders, all those faces that once laughed at the word promise, and his voice dropped lower, carrying the steady calm of memory. "I've seen empires fall for greed, fleets break for vengeance, and kings lie for comfort. But I saw one human walk into hell for a stranger's child and come back. That's not courage. That's something older. Something even death steps aside for." For a long time, none dared speak. The heater crackled softly, throwing its last flickers of light across their thoughtful faces. Then the youngest merchant whispered, almost to himself, "And to think all that for the sake of a mere promise." Careth smiled faintly, the kind that carries both sorrow and respect. "No," he said. "He did it because of what a promise means to a human. It defines them." Outside, the freighter drifted on, a silver thread through the dark, and somewhere far away in a forgotten market on Vallis Prime, the story of one human's promise still lived on, whispered in awe by those who had seen the impossible become truth.